Welcome to McKinsey Live. Today's moderator is Lareina Yee.
Hello and welcome to McKinsey Live. I'm Lareina Yee, McKinsey's editorial director, and your host for today's event, Future Frontiers, Navigating the Next Wave of Tech Innovations. Quick note before we start, our goal with this series is to give you an opportunity to engage with our latest research. Obviously, asking questions is a big part of that, so if you are a registered member of our audience, please feel free to use the Q&A functionality to ask whatever comes to mind during our time together. So today, brand new research on the most vital tech trends unfolding in 2024. Joining us to discuss where leaders should be focusing in the tech space are two of McKinsey's leading technology experts, Lareina Yee and Roger Roberts. Lareina is a senior partner and Roger a partner, both in our Bay Area office in the thick of the industry in California, and they lead McKinsey's Technology Council and oversee our research on emerging technologies. Lareina and Roger, welcome to McKinsey Live.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Lucia.
It's great to have you here today. Let's start with some context. This is the fourth year McKinsey has undertaken this research, identifying the biggest tech trends, shaping and reshaping the contours of the business landscape. Lareina, let's start with you. Tell us a bit about the research and some of the key takeaways this year, and also, if you would, why it matters. So the operating environment now for leaders continues to be unusually complex. What's really at stake for executives in staying ahead of these changing trends?
Well, thank you, Lucia. It is our fourth year. And the reason that we do this is that we endeavor to give executives a sense of the landscape of technology trends, what is around the corner. And one of the things that we know is that these are the markers of what will change our capabilities and our abilities to compete faster and better. And the other thing we know is that unlike the last decade or the decade before, the pace at which these trends move are incredibly fast. And certainly generative AI has been a spotlight that really brings that to life, but across all of these, and it's important to remember we have far more trends than simply generative AI happening. So, Lucia, to answer your question, it is top of mind for so many executives as they are in search of growth, as well as in search of operational efficiencies and improvements. Some of the things that would be worth mentioning include that the technology investment landscape actually fell year over year. And that's not surprising when we think about the macroeconomic environment. But one of the reasons I mentioned that is despite a drop in the investments in technology, the underlying outlook remains incredibly positive. And what do I mean by underlying outlook? One of the things that we look at is the pace of innovation as expressed by patents and research and investment levels within corporations. We also look at the interest level in terms of press and search. And what you see is that patents and research, the fundamental work that drives the innovation, that has continued to go strong. We also take a look at job postings. So we look at several markers to understand where is the energy and where's the momentum around these trends. As an overall, for folks looking at this for the first time, we took a look at over 100 technology trends and boiled it down to 15 across 5 major categories that matter a lot. And those categories, as you see on the slide here, are the AI revolution, building the digital future, compute and connectivity, cutting edge engineering, and sustainability. And one of the things that's truly interesting about this is whilst everyone is expecting that generative AI is, of course, a standout trend, also we saw a huge increase in electrification and renewables, as well as we added a trend this year around robotics. And when we think about robotics, we'll talk about this more, but one of the things that's so exciting is that while each of these are individual technology trends, they can have amplifying effects on each other. And so with the advancements across AI and Gen AI overall, we've seen that that has been a fuel for capabilities that we see now that's spurring a greater level of innovation in the next generation of robotic capabilities. So that's just kind of a snapshot, but I think overall, despite economic headwinds, Lucia, it's a pretty optimistic time for technology. And the question for business leaders is, are you tracking these? Because you will soon need to make investment decisions on how relevant some, certainly not all, of these trends are in your own business performance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let's use that as a jumping off point and talk about Gen AI. Start with Gen AI. It's obviously the headline, as you described, that has dominated the past 18 months. It's inspired incredible excitement, in some cases peril. In this year's research, you focus a little less on the technology itself and a bit more on how Gen AI is imbricated with other tech trends in ways that make it powerful for business, as you just alluded to with robotics. Talk to us about what the research revealed here.
Sure. Well, we see it in our own day-to-day lives in the headlines. Let me put a number to that. We've seen a 700% increase in Google searches from 2022 to 2023. So in the second year of this amazing trend, we see such a spike in terms of interest. For each of the 15 trends, what we do is we take a look at what is the technology itself, what are some of the advancements we've seen year over year that make it pretty exciting, and then we spend time taking a look at the use cases. How are companies across different industries starting to use the technology for business outcomes? And to give you a snapshot, Lucia, of what that looks like for generative AI, one of the things that's very exciting for Roger and I, who just love technology, is how much the rate of fundamental engineering innovation has been over the last year. So for generative AI, one of my favorite kind of frontier capabilities is the context window. So the context window is what you can sort of put into the question box, so to speak. Think of your context window as your short-term memory of your brain, if that's an analogy. And when ChatGPT first came on the scene and you started to see Gemini capabilities, that context window could basically, that was 100,000 tokens. And basically what that meant is you could load a research paper, like a scientific research paper or your 8th grade research paper, and the model would incorporate that into its answer. Today, Google announced that it could have 2 million tokens, and that is the equivalent of putting 20 novels into the context window and saying, help me understand, synthesize, make sense of this. So that's just one example of the technology change. We've seen a lot in terms of multimodal, which is fancy for people watching this for saying that you can use text, you can do image, you can do sound. We're seeing a lot more with video. And so that's going to be quite a spur in terms of the capabilities applied. And then, just to highlight some of the things that we're pretty excited about are frankly very practical capabilities that these models allow businesses to implement, one of which is accelerating our abilities in next generation software. And another one that we are also excited about is the relationship between advances in generative AI and that relationship with cloud and edge. So two things. One is cloud and edge computing's ability to interface and to work with these foundation models for the results you need. But the other one is obviously something that people have seen more about in the press, is about how that is also driving innovation in cloud and edge technology. Particularly, we're starting to see use cases around edge computing for low latency AI use cases. So without getting too into the weeds, there are a lot of different applications that we start to see. But of course, it is really important for this technology in particular to remind everyone it's early days. So it's early days of the technology and it's early days of applying it into business. So we haven't quite seen all the productivity gains that we project over the long run, and that's actually to be expected. Companies are moving from thinking about what they want to do, doing their initial pilots, and then starting to enter the phase of being able to scale that for the economic value.
Lareina, that's a nice transition. It's interesting, 2 years ago, say, Gen AI wasn't even named as one of our tech trends.
That's right.
And so obviously it is early days. Roger, on this point about scaling, what have you observed about the rate of innovation and adoption among organizations?
Well, Lucia, every year we look at adoption, and this year we took an even harder look, and we broke it down against a framework here, a classic S curve. And what we're seeing is that uh, technologies are moving even faster up this curve, from that frontier innovation of science toward engineering pilots, and then to really scaled adoption. And we're starting this year to see about 8 of our 15 trends that have moved from beyond piloting are really starting to scale. So obviously this includes some of the biggest and longest lived trends around cloud and edge computing and advanced connectivity, but it also very rapidly embraced generative AI and applied AI, which are delivering really incredible new experiences and new impact. On the next horizon, we start to see next-gen software development, digital trust, and cyber, and some of the underlying work that enables the scale up of AI, which we call industrializing machine learning. Those are starting to clear from experimenting into the pilot stage. And so overall, we see this compression of the time from science to engineering to scale. And as business leaders look at this landscape, they need to get ready even faster for things that come over the horizon at them. And we'll see real advantages to those organizations that are the most ready to act when the moment comes.
Super interesting. At the top of this event, Lareina mentioned robotics as a trend to watch for. Mm-hmm. Robots are another one of those tech developments, right, that folks may be fascinated and frightened by in equal measure. Talk to us about how AI is helping to propel robotics as a field and how robots might be used in the business context in ways that leaders should be aware of.
Well, what really led us to see an inflection point coming in robotics is the adoption of what we call large behavioral models. So taking some of the constructs and concepts applied in large language models and bringing that into the world of robotics, bringing that to the physical world and the way that the robot learns within that physical world. And so in the past, you had robots that were built on a very task-specific basis. And so they were kind of fixed into structured production lines. And now we're seeing just another level of flexibility that can really change the economics of robot deployment. And importantly, that derives from new ways of training them using synthetic training data or iterative reinforcement training methods. And that means that they can start with a task and get better and better at that task as they perform it. So in the past, we're used to the physics of capital investment as being, I spend money and then things depreciate over time. Now we can start to look at robots that get better over time, right? Your value from your investment goes up. And that is really game changing. So we're really excited by this move from simple verbal chatbots that we started to see in 2022 toward increasingly capable robots. And that's starting to hit some new sectors too that weren't so commonly adopters. Agriculture, oil and gas, hospitality, things that are fundamentally hard as robotics problems are now becoming more tractable and feasible. And as you mentioned, we have to also think about the risks here. And certainly, we're going to have more dialogue about what responsible robotics means and the kinds of environments and the kinds of rules of the road, so to speak, that we create as these robotic capabilities grow and grow.
Indeed, right. New technologies, new risks. Roger, I think we'd be remiss here in not touching on the implications of these trends for the talent landscape. Mm-hmm. Tell us, if you would, how these trends might affect the kinds of talent that businesses are looking to hire and retain.
Well, on the talent side, we looked at each of the trends and we tried to break each one down into the constituent skills that are needed to really bring that trend to life inside an enterprise. And then we look at the talent supply and demand within each of those sub-markets for skills. And one thing that was very clear is that those markets remain quite constrained. So we had a serious supply deficit, even in broadly adopted trends like advanced connectivity, cloud, and edge, and in some emerging spaces like immersive realities and the future of mobility, where all 5 of the top skills that we found in our analysis were facing serious constraints or supply demand deficits. In addition, we also looked at some of the hot skills individually, and no surprise, AI is right at the top of that list, but also some more fundamentals of computer engineering and software engineering and automation, et cetera, are remain really constrained in the markets that we observe. And so as we come at this, and it even extends, of course, into some of the areas of sustainability, like those that are linked to renewable energy, we start to say that we're going to need a lot more upskilling and reskilling, right? Just what our universities and training programs can deliver formally will not be enough. And enterprises are really going to have to think about how they invest in that upskilling and reskilling to be ready for the futures that are coming.
Okay, so let's turn now to what all this means for executives. What should leaders do differently in order to monitor and to mobilize against these trends? And Lareina, let's turn to you for that one.
Sure. I think there is something about how you build the ecosystem around you, but maybe just to sort of put a little bit more emphasis on the points that Roger was making on talent, because there is this point, but also on talent. I think when we break down the capabilities that matter by trend, this is also a bit of a roadmap for executives to think about the capabilities they're going to need. They're not going to adopt all 15 trends. We wouldn't expect that, but you're going to adopt a subset of them. They're going to be a business imperative. And it's good also to look forward. What are the capabilities you'll need to do that well? I think the most classic and well trodden example of some of those capabilities are basically software engineering. And so you saw, for example, in the auto industry, the incredible amount of innovation in the dashboard over the last decade and a half that has really been fueled underneath by capabilities in software engineering. And we have new varieties of those stories. And so I do think one of the things for executives is to look at their talent and also what's coming around the corner and say, how will I continue to create opportunities for my people in terms of investing in those skills? So I think that's one huge opportunity, because at the end of the day, whilst Roger and I are super excited about technology and we spend all of our time in it, it's all in service of humanity and people. And so ultimately organizations are people systems. And so how is the technology helping people, providing opportunities, and helping us do our work differently? And with that, I think what this chart is about is how do you leverage all of these technologies? And Lucia, one of the things that a lot of CEOs and board members will say is, my goodness, like, let's just take generative AI as an example. I mean, it's billions of dollars to train and create a large language model. Certainly that's not something I should take on. And that's absolutely right. I mean, that scale of innovation, what you want to do is partner and leverage that technology into your own, which leads to this very kind of simple question of, how do I think about it? Because in the old world, the construct was, what do I buy? And what do I build? And maybe for some organizations, they had a bias to building things on their own. And what we're finding with these trends, all 15 of these are going to be more ecosystem forward, meaning that it's not going to be a black and white question of build versus buy. There's going to be a question of, how do I partner? How do I partner on developing solutions and innovations? And you're going to do that at kind of every layer. So on this chart, all the way down to the infrastructure that you need, to the next layer around the data platforms and the capabilities that you have, and then moving up to the foundation model and the applications and even the UI UX that you get. So one of the things is you probably aren't going to own and operate that complete stack. You're going to partner with a series of players. And one of the things I think for business executives that's difficult is that's actually a harder thing to execute. but also who the players are is changing. So you've got a plethora of startups and relatively new companies to the scene that have unbelievable capabilities at all levels. And then you also have our traditional large technology companies, trillion-dollar valuation companies that have enormous innovation and new offerings. So I think on the one hand, there's more to learn, but there's also more of this ecosystem to harness so that you can bring some of these capabilities into your organization faster and also at scale. And let me just add a very practical end, which is and thinking about it in a cost-efficient way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Super interesting. Okay. I'm mindful of time, and not unexpectedly, we've had quite a number of questions here from the audience. So let's try to fit 2 or 3 of those in. And let's start with this high level one. It's maybe a broad interest. So obviously there are a range of trends, as you described, mapped out in the report, and the report is available on our website, so people should look for it on McKinsey.com. But if you had to zero in on a couple more, which other emerging tech trends do you expect to create investor interest or to make meaningful or substantial progress in the next 12 months? Roger, maybe you'll take that one for us.
Well, I don't think in the week following the CrowdStrike incident we can fail to mention digital trust and cybersecurity, right? I think everyone recognizes this as a domain for important innovation, and as the threats evolve faster and faster, we've got to evolve our defenses faster and faster. And so that to me, number one and rising in in importance. I will also call out bioengineering, right? I think bioengineering has been on a long and positive trajectory. It also retains many risks and concerns, but the acceleration of bioengineering via AI is a important development, and I think can hold the potential for addressing many challenging conditions, diseases that are quote orphaned, hard to rally investment against, and as the cost and scale needed to take on those challenges drops with technology, we're going to see some real positives for humanity.
Right. Very helpful. Now, we have a good one on hype. Lareina, let's turn to you for this. What is your advice for executives that need to disambiguate hype from like the genuine value delivering potential, particularly when these technologies are emerging and changing so quickly?
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say is all of these trends are multi-decade trends in the making. So if we think about AI, which is a category, we have our analytical AI, we've got machine learning, we've got generative AI, applied AI. We think of all of that. That's a 40-year in the making trend. So one thing is, whilst there's a lot of excitement this year and at this point in time, understand that the science and the transition from science to engineering has been happening for a long time. So one thing I would say is to have a capability where you are looking and sensing these trends so that none of them surprise you. And then the second thing I would say in terms of hype versus reality is it comes to a head when we look at the use cases. And the use cases tend to be very practical. And whilst I think you will have some extraordinary examples of solving diseases or something like that Roger was just talking about for bioengineering, that, you know, we have a capability to do something completely unseen before. The vast majority of the applications will be things that actually accelerate your business priorities, which, you know, not to oversimplify, tend to be around productivity and efficiencies in your work, in your business process and systems, or the ability to drive growth, maybe an ability to bring a new product or service to market. So it's going to be grounded in things that are practical, and always making sure you're connecting what is my business objective to how technology is an accelerator for that is really important. If it's just technology for technology's sake, we've seen far less success in that, even though some of these trends are so exciting and so kind of bedazzling. At the end of the day, their applications tend to be very practical. And for us, that's probably the most exciting part of it because it drives business performance and it opens up new possibilities that way.
Okay, and that's a super a nice segue into this question, which is kind of high level. Very briefly, what are each of you most excited about as you look at this evolving future of tech? Either can jump in. Roger, jump in.
Yeah, well, I think I'm really excited about what we're going to see in terms of AI innovation, right? Within that family of AI that Lareina described, there's a lot of interplay. And one thing we're seeing is the action, that you read about is in the quote, big models fighting for supremacy. But actually, we see a lot of movement in small models with specific tasks, small models that can run on cheaper, lower power hardware that are quote closer to the edge, meaning closer to their user, but that could mean, in your car, in your home, in different ways. And that I think will reshape a number of people's experiences as people really open up to the possibilities there.
Lareina, what about you?
Lucia, it's hard. We like all 15 because actually it took us a lot to go from 100 to the 15. So really, it's like I can't really pick, but there are many things to admire about each. And so maybe I'll touch on something we haven't talked about here, which is quantum computing. And so just I mentioned this one. It is not one of the ones that we spotlight as the top 2, although they're all top 15. But one of the interesting things is that, it's similar. It's to generative AI. It has the characteristics of being incredibly hard scientific discovery till it's cracked. And then when it's cracked and when, it is solved and it's something that we can use, it will be very game changing. So I'm optimistic about the long-term potential of quantum computing in particular, and there are other branches of quantum. But if you think about different types of use cases, like to your point about digital trust, it could completely change how we think about cryptography. That's pretty essential for banking, but pretty essential for all of us, our everyday lives, having our data and our information, particularly our money, be more secure. I'm kind of all for that. And it's not something that is going to be kind of a slow drip. It is a little bit of a black and white moment where it will be capable and it will be very powerful. And so monitoring the pace of that, seeing increased investment, seeing more talent go into this, even starting at the university level and then into the work level, seeing some of the venture capital money, some of the startups that, are working with, the first generation, they might call them more second or third, but they're starting to work with the first sort of set of qubits. All of that's really exciting. And I think for a business audience, you may not say, look, that may not be something I need to invest in, but it may not even affect my business. Or maybe it is really important. I'm a bank and I just want to keep tracking that trend, monitoring it very closely. Mm-hmm. And I think for executives, we hope that the 15 trends are just interesting to understand what's going on in the world, but then you can start to say, where are some of my just tracking to understand? Where might some of my investments be? And then where might I actually want to have some of that development capability reside in my organization? And that, or at its most exciting, where might I see a different business vector that I can move into? And so, we didn't talk a lot about mobility, but, we've talked a lot about autonomous vehicles in previous years. Like just thinking through that, I mean, there are a whole set of capabilities there. So, Lucia, I'm so sorry, I couldn't pick one. Several of them, all 15 are wonderful.
It's super exciting though. Okay, that brings us to time. It was such a great discussion, Lareina and Roger. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you. It was wonderful to have the opportunity to share the work.
Thank you, Lucia.
Here. Yeah, and as always, many thanks to all of you watching. You can find a replay of this session and previous McKinsey Lives at mckinsey.com/live or by using the QR code on your screen. It will come up there. We will return back in September to discuss a topic close to McKinsey, the art and science of leadership, with the authors of the forthcoming book, The Journey of Leadership, How CEOs Learn to Lead from the Inside Out. That event will happen on September 10th, the week the book comes out. So be sure to watch our website for that early and potentially exclusive access to the authors, Donna Mayor and Kurt Strovink. See you then, and have a great day or evening. Be well.